With Aakar Patel. Idea is you can ask him anything. So what we'll do is we'll have Aakar talk about his latest book, and post that we'll start with questions. The questions can be about this book, his previous books, and anything else you'd like to ask him.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the LitFest for having me. It's very difficult to have a fora where you can talk about these things in India these days. Most of us who used to be on television regularly over the last 20 years no longer have that space if we should want to go. And I think it's important that in whatever small way possible, people who dissent and have some sort of objection to what's going on in this country be able to communicate with those people who feel like them. So I'm really thankful to you for coming. Thankful to the LitFest for letting me speak. My book, the new book, looks at two things broadly. One is how within the framework of a secular state, we've managed to introduce a set of communal laws and communal practices which no longer separate us from the rest of the subcontinent. So that's one. The second part is that I think since we're in year 8, substantially through year 8, it's fairly clear that economically we are not describing the sort of trajectory that the East Asian tigers did or China did. I think we are going in another direction. And I think it's fairly clear that the government data itself says that this is the case. So that is the book. There's a lot of data in it. It's called The Price of the Modi Years. Should that book interest you, I think it's for sale downstairs. The book before that, which this young lady got assigned from me, is called Our Hindu Rashtra, and that very briefly shows the route that Pakistan took to get where it is today and the route that we have taken to get where we are today. That things like fundamental rights that the Christians specifically asked for in terms of the right to propagate were taken away from them deviously, and that process has actually deepened post 2014, and post 2018 we've got laws that have brought the Muslims into the Article 25 snare as well. So those are the two books. I can take questions now. I think there was a hand up here first.
Yeah, you have the mic with you?
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Hold the mic close.
Yes, is it better? Yeah. Sir, you have covered the most vilest men in Indian politics for more than 2 decades. What is the secret to your longevity? Because if we see their march to power, they have like eliminated everyone, whoever has crossed their paths.
Well, I don't know if I have survived. So I have lost 95% of the writing work that I had, say, 5 to 6 years ago. So there is very little space. Part of that is that Mr. Modi has shattered the economy, especially the media. So the media is dependent on a healthy economy. There are people here, there are some friends here who are from newspapers. They will know that newspapers operate only in spaces where the advertiser feels that there is a bullishness to the market and that the consumer will buy the product that she puts out. So, whether it's Adidas or whether it's whatever it is. What's happened in the last 4 years especially is that the advertising cycle has gone negative. So part of that has to also do with the fact that it's moved towards digital. But newspapers are dying today. And many of them died last year, including the Mumbai Mirror, which was doing 4.5 lakh copies a day. So that's one part. The other part is that the government of India has always had a fairly good danda, which is the advertising carrot. It spends about 1,300 crore rupees a year directly and about 1,200 crore rupees indirectly through the PSU. So that's 2,500 crore rupees or 200 crore rupees a month, which is given in discretionary terms to the media. And it's not given to those papers, those channels or whatever that have an anti-Modi. So anyway, long story short, many of us have lost work, but that's fine. I'm saying that it's not such a big deal. It's the fact that many of us had runs of 15 and 20 years, before that is good enough. Secondly, I should say this, that it's safer to say things in English in this country and generally speaking on the subcontinent than it is in the a vernacular, or the so-called, vernacular. So, which is one reason why books like mine do not actually get translated. Uh, uh, Allama Iqbal in the 20s wrote his reconstruction lectures only in one language, English, because he felt he would get lynched if they were published in Urdu. So yeah, those would be the two reasons. Yes.
Hi, Aakar, Nikhil here. So, quick question on polarization and echo chambers and how you think about the audiences that read your book. And so, when you're writing the book, what that process is like as you think about different types of people across the spectrum reading your book, and sort of a larger question on how do we more, like in your opinion, reduce polarization and create more discourse so that there are both sides of the conversation, or is that futile?
Yeah, it's really tough. So I think that the theory is that there is a middle that you speak to, that there are two sides, and then one side is fixed, rigidly, in the sense that it believes that what's going on in this country is wrong, and then the other side feels that what's going on is right. And they might have some sort of, okay, maybe it's mostly right and a little bit wrong, and I might say it's mostly wrong with a little bit of right, and there's like a theoretical middle. I don't think we have that. So basically, what is the trajectory of the human mind, that you look at evidence, and then based on that, you would say this is the way things are. Set aside the economy for a moment. I'm saying that human rights groups in India don't need further evidence or documentation to show that state laws are going after minorities, and that hurts them. So 97% of all lynchings related to beef came after 2015. 100% of all fatalities that we know that have been recorded came after 2015. Why? And the reason was that the Prime Minister pushed this with his Pink Revolution thesis, and then two BJP states responded, Maharashtra first, Haryana second, and then the cycle began. We had Akhlaq and all the rest of it. So I'm saying that at what point do we say to the other side that, okay, what's happening is wrong, and maybe I'll show you some data, and then you come to my side, or you come to the middle. I don't know if that's possible. And I don't want to engage with somebody, though this is very dumb of me, and I should actually engage with them, to say, I don't want to engage with somebody who's okay with this. And I don't think that there is a problem of insufficient data at the moment. Mr. Modi's incompetence and his malice are writ large on the polity. So I don't know whether, getting out of this echo chamber will be easy. I don't think it will. But I don't even see a possibility of there being a way out. How do you engage with somebody who says it's okay for India to have 5 crore fewer people working today than we did in 2013? This is government data. But also says that we are doing really well, in terms of the economy. So what's the basis of the conversation?
Sorry, yeah. This is Asif here. So I read this book a week ago. I finished it. And I was mind blowing. I mean, it was like, you peeled each layer meticulously in revealing the truth was amazing, So I just wanted to know that you have mentioned in the book that what has happened to our country over the last 7 years and what will happen to it in next 3 years. So we expect next part 2 of this book after 3 years?
I started writing this pretty sort of early on because I knew that this would be the case, and because I had known Mr. Modi for a very long time. I'd met him often. I figured that somebody like him in this kind of position would bring us here. So I started writing it fairly early on. I don't think that the next 3 years will be different. So to my mind, things are extremely bad on the side of both the social fabric and on the side of the economy. And I think they will continue in this fashion for the next 3 years. I also believe, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, that the BJP will come back to power in 2024. They have far too much advantage on the ground in terms of resource, and their ground game, generally speaking, is much better. So I think that maybe another 10 years of this, yeah.
How do you maintain your sanity?
I don't know. Maybe I'm thick-skinned, but I don't have a problem sleeping at night. I don't have a problem. I don't get discouraged. If I don't know if that's the meaning of what I should take out of your question, but I feel that the long term is very good for humankind. Unfortunately, we don't have too much of a contribution to make. I think the external world will come and sweep aside whatever mischief is happening in these petty nations like ours. I think that maybe 15 or 20 years at the most is what we have. Given that fact, I think we should be doing what it is that we can to either live through or fight back against what the times give us. But I think the short answer is that I'm quite thick-skinned, and things don't sort of affect me much.
I'm Mr. Patel. So one thing that I kind of, in all our interactions, who do not believe in the dispensation, when we engage with the other side, we talked about that, comes down to a question of what is the alternative. And I just want to hear your thoughts on the same.
I don't particularly care who wins the next poll. I don't want these people to win. So to my mind, and this is true of a lot of people, perhaps it's the English speaking lot in cities that feels this way, that they are okay with OIC, they are okay with Mamata Banerjee, they are okay with Deve Gowda, they are okay with, I don't know about, the Thakres, I don't like them much, but I'm saying that anybody else is doing well in their state is fine. And the reason for that is that there is gratuitous damage to this nation that the BJP causes. That you could have economic incompetence from any party, and we have had it. I don't think that we, even in the 2004-2014 period, we were doing what it is that China did. We tried to, but I don't think that we actually did it. So to my mind, it's, there is some space. Having said that, I should say that Mr. Modi's managed the economy really badly, and I'm saying that this is his own data. But that aside, I think that what we are bringing into this country through legislation and through practice every week, and the devolution of that into society at large, what we are doing is this. We are letting go of one of the fundamental pillars of the state, which is the monopoly over force. That the state monopolizes violence in a legitimate state. And what India has done is that it has allowed groups of people of maybe this size, maybe slightly larger, to get to stop a prayer, say, in spaces that the state has allocated to a minority, where a mob can come and tell this lot of people, it doesn't matter if the government gave you this space, you can't do this today, and you won't be able to do it today. That is the devolution of the monopoly of violence. You're telling people in Gujarat that you cannot cook eggs here. They are licensed hawkers, or they are as unlicensed as all the other hawkers, right? But they are being told by the mob, you can't do this today. And the mob is taking its cue from the state. This is the most endogamous part of the world. Even the wealthiest Indian marries only within his subcaste. In this nation, the moronic theory is that Muslims are coming and taking our women away through marriage. There is no data for this. But based on that, 5 BJP states have passed laws which criminalize a Muslim-Hindu marriage. And they reverse the burden of proof. An adult woman's testimony that she converted of her own volition is not sufficient evidence for the state. It's for the district magistrate or the collector to speak to the man in the family or his mother and father and ask them whether they coerced her. Karnataka is the first state in the south to go that route. We are passing that law. Hopefully not, but based on what was said yesterday and the day before, it seems like we'll be the 6th state and the first state in the south. So yeah, so this devolution of this will stay with us, even if the BJP loses, because society is now empowered to take action. This is not going away; it will stay. Yeah. So yeah.
Sir, the biggest cheerleaders of this government are the NRI diaspora, which has money and is obviously immune to any of the economic misadventures which this particular government takes. So how do we deal with that?
I don't think we can. I don't know if it's the NRI so much as the PIO is the most damaging, because she and he have no stake here at all. They come here to meet, Nana Nani or whatever else, but they've got their passports which have the US, a flag on them. So for that lot, I don't know. One of the problems that we have is that the funding of non-profits is controlled very rigidly by the state, where it comes to dealing with, say, things like human rights or things like education, things like health. But the money coming into the RSS is not actually regulated. So the RSS is the world's largest a non-profit entity, but operates with a degree of opacity that no other NGO can actually function with. And one reason why it's so powerful is that it gets a lot of money from Gujaratis to a large extent, but also I think the new southern middle class that's making a lot of money in the US. Yeah, so I don't know how that can be stopped. I don't think it can be stopped, but it is a serious problem.
Bangladesh has moved ahead of us economically. Now, is it Pakistan that's going to do that next, in your opinion?
So one strange thing that's happened, that's Karthik, by the way, who was the editor of my book. Bangladesh was 50% behind in 2014. So it's not just the pandemic, which is what the government and its minions will tell us, that, oh, it's just this one, hiccup. That's not true. They were 50% behind us in 2014. They caught up with us, and then with the pandemic, they went through. Why is that? They have a higher labor force participation rate, especially that for women. Only between 10 and 12% of those women in India who are of working age, which is counted as 15 plus, are actually working or looking for work. Why? We don't know, because there are no studies on this. Is it the patriarchy here? But even Bangladesh has a patriarchy, but we've got a higher labor force participation. Secondly, Make in India was launched. After Make in India was launched, India's share of manufacturing in GDP has fallen from 16% to 13%. This is also government data. Whereas Bangladesh and Vietnam has gone up. So they've managed to, at the lower end of the formal economy, where you get large numbers of people working on or sort of simple things, where women feel safe. There are 4 lakh women in Bangalore's garments industry. They come from all over the country, mostly in the south. But they feel safe because, other than the supervisor, most of the people in that working hall are actually female. Bangladesh has that scaled up. So they can send very large numbers of women who don't necessarily need a lot of education to work in the garments space. Pakistan's labor force participation rate is higher than ours. Why? I don't know. Nobody knows, because these things are not the subject of a political debate in India. But government data, there are 2 surveys. One is the 2013-2014 survey, and one is the one that we did this year, show that the labor force participation has been falling each year. People are getting out of the workforce. They're not looking for jobs, and they're not working. We have the lowest labor force participation rate in South Asia. It's more or less the same as Somalia's. And the problem with that is that there is no mid-term future. That these are hundreds of millions of people with no work and are not looking for work. So will Pakistan go ahead? Well, I hope not. I'm like a patriot. I don't want to run down another country, and I hope that Pakistan does well. I'm really happy for Bangladesh. They executed a strategy well, and they were able to get ahead of it. Good for them. I hope we do well as well. But I don't see how we will. If you don't discuss, how do you correct a problem? The first step is to acknowledge it. What part of the democratic process in this country tells us that there is a belief that we are going in the wrong direction in any sense of the word? None. The media is delirious with joy. The politics is never about jobs or the price of petrol. It's usually about let's stop them from praying here, let's stop them from marrying. Somebody said this really witty thing on Twitter: don't eat, don't pray, don't love. Yeah, so that's what we become. Yeah, you can't do that.
Hi, Aakar. Here, over here.
Hi.
Hey. You mentioned earlier that you think that this is just a 15 to 20-year blip, and in the really long run, things look positive. And you referenced external forces that would make all of this fairly irrelevant and just in our lifetimes relevant, I suppose. Could you expand on what you mean?
So I think we don't have too much time before automation closes entirely the route that large poor countries have to transition their populations into lower middle income, higher middle income. That time is gone. So what is the classical route that all these tigers have taken? That they got into what Bangladesh and Vietnam are doing today, which is have large numbers of people working on, say, garments, construction, assembly of, but automation means that every year it seems to be the case that the human role in these things, in these basic things, is going down. For the wealthy nations, it's possible that you can have the state take care of a very large number of people and send them the money because the levels of taxation are high and they are wealthy. And so you don't need to work, or you need to work very, very little. For us, that's not really a possibility. What happens when most of your people don't have work and most of your people don't have money and things are desperate? I think at that point, externally things will come and change. So one of the things that the state would hold on to was communications. So if you look at the agreement that India has with Kashmir, which we may or may not have scrapped because that act was quite vague and the Supreme Court refuses to hear it, was communication. So they would take care that the union government would take care of visas, defense, and comms. So communications is very important. But what's happened in the last 15 years is states have ceded the right to communicate to US companies. BSNL, MTNL no longer can control, they can't tap your stuff, they can do it through, a slightly more expensive method. But WhatsApp controls the communications, or Facebook does, or, Google does. The state has a very minor role. Something similar will come to be here. I think the other thing that occurs to me is that, especially in space and what's going on in terms of so in space, what happened is after 69, which is when we put people on the moon, the space race died down because there was no reason for the US. The US public lost, total sort of interest in the fact that people were going to the moon, and they disinvested. And till last year, the US did not have for 10 years the capacity to put man into lower Earth orbit. So they used to use the Russian rocket, which is 60 years old, to send people up to the space station. That changed last year, but that's a private firm that's done it. Now, these are firms and these are entities that are saying we'll set up colonies on Mars within the next 10, 15 years. What happens when a set of multinational people start setting up colonies outside of Earth and they look back to Earth and we are saying you can't marry this person and you can't pray here? Or it just seems like slightly mindless, right? Something that modernity will come and sweep all the rubbish away. And my guess is that maybe a couple of decades tops.
How do you account for such a large support which this regime has generated amongst the society? And it's not just one-off phenomena. It continues over last 7 years. And has the society been a victim of large propaganda, or has it lost its sense of ethics completely?
So I think that majoritarianism is quite a powerful tool, politically, to mobilize against somebody else who is lesser in terms of numbers, and is fairly easy to do in less developed nations. So it's not just about us. It's about, Hutus and Tutsis or Shias and Sunnis and so on. This is the standard format of primitive states, where the debate of democracy is not about whether or not we should be letting the state um, arm itself, or whether or not we should be having peace with our neighbors so that we can move resource more towards other things, but whether or not Muslims will be allowed to marry Hindus, or whether they can eat beef, or so this is sort of relatively easy to do. Also, in primitive poor nations, the suffering of the self appears not to be a very big part of the way that people vote, because you have such little agency over your own life. You are born poor, you die poor. You want the agency where you can get it, and stopping somebody else from doing something is a sense of power. I will break that mosque. I can't get a job and I can't sort of educate my kids properly, but I can break that mosque. So I'm saying that it gives a sense of authority, and it's quite a powerful tool. Yeah.
Hi, Aakar. The political discourse is now getting discussed in drawing room conversations. I mean, many of us are having to choose friends depending on which side of the fence you're on. My question really is, as a rational thinking middle class person, what is it that we can do? I mean, we have conversations, we have a set of friends who we can, discuss at length about these things and feel a sense of pain and exasperation. But is there any recourse as such, or do we just watch things happening and unfolding?
I don't have too much sort of experience in this. I should say this, that my family, though we are Gujus, it's pretty liberal, and has always been, which is and I don't know why, but as somebody who doesn't have too much experience dealing with this, I would say that with those that you can't get rid of, let's say mummy and mama, or like whoever else, there you try and use data, that you put your point forward, and then you don't need to argue beyond that. And I would say that with those that you can get rid of, get rid of them. There's no point in having a relationship where, I think that this is a fundamental problem. This is not the normal kind of a political debate that one friend and another friend has. This is about one side has successfully taken India into a pretty dark space. And whatever benefits they might see in this country being there, I don't think I need to engage with that. So I don't.
Yeah, so, do you see like a foreseeable end to this cycle? Is there anything for young people to look forward to? Is there anything we can do?
See, the thing that in democracies, we have three things that empower us. We've got the vote, we've got the court, which not that many people use, and we've got a protest. I think what's happened in the last 24 months, since the 15th of December 2019, is that the spirit of the pre-47 era seems to have been sparked in very large parts, especially minorities, I should say, that they are the ones who led. And they are the ones who won. The reason why we don't have CAA today is because of the Muslims, especially the Muslim women. And the reason why we don't have the farm laws is because of the Punjabis, and especially the Sikhs. So there is something that has pushed them to the edge, where they've said, okay, if we don't act now and don't take up and don't act with our constitutional right, which is the right to protest, the right to a peaceful assembly is a fundamental right, then the state will run us over. And I think that these three things do actually give us hope that we can use these. We do have the agency in this sense. Yeah.
Hi, Aakar. My question is, it's not a question, but more of an observation, right? Because you said the social fabric of the country, right, is being torn away, right? And that there is no foreseeable future where we can get back to that. But do you believe, right, me thinking back, right, as a civilization for the last 300, 400 years, right? So we were colonized, right? And I think the Britishers were as bad as the current regime, we could say, or even much worse, because even they used the divisions among us, right, to forward their agenda. Then there was the partition where, again, the riots took place, and there are many things which have happened, right? So in the long run, right, I believe, are we how do I put it? Are we putting too much stock into this? See, I am not trying to negate the individuals, right, or the minorities who are going through a lot of hardships, right? I'm not doing into that. But let's say instead of focusing on the real stuff, right, like the jobs, the economies, bringing people back into that, right? Are we giving too much of an importance to whatever the social misdemeanors, right, which the current government and its machinery is doing?
So I don't know if we can cleanly separate the two. You've got in this state today, last week, the PUCL, of which I am a member, and I contributed to this report. It documented 39 emblematic cases of attacks on Christians. These were acts that were carried out in concert, and they attacked the right to worship. They went into people's homes, into churches, into prayer halls, and say, you can't pray here. With that, the state is now bringing in a law which will tighten the fact that tighten the way that Christians will be able to practice their faith. Now, what that does is it triggers a certain set of things in society. I'll ask you a question, and not just you. I'm saying I'll ask us a question. If I were a Muslim with capital in the city of Baroda, where I've seen mobs say that you can't run this hotel because it's got a name like Blue Moon, but it's owned by you, and you're a Muslim, but it doesn't show the fact that you can't own this, and will I be encouraged to deploy the capital that I have? Now, minorities in India tend to be quite poorer than the rest of society, but the minorities also have mercantile capital. Like you've got the Memons, Khojas, Bohras in Gujarat, you've got the Bhatkali Muslims in our state, you've got in Kerala, you've got a very serious population. Would they be encouraged to put themselves out, put their savings out and say, okay, I'll risk this because I think I can do well over the next 10, 15 years? Not being a Muslim, I can't answer that, but I suspect that they'll probably say no. That it's not easy for me, particularly in this sort of business, where you're customer facing and you are vulnerable to losses for being shut down just for a day or two. So what we are doing to the economy will come out of what we are doing to the rest of the polity. So for us to very cleanly separate the two, saying, okay, it's okay for a little bit of mischief here, as long as we are doing well there, I don't know whether that actually applies.
So you mentioned the labor workforce participation is dropping in the country, but does that data actually include like the gig economy? Like if you look at it, in the last 10, 15 years, the number of drivers, Ola, Uber, delivery guys, Zomato, Swiggy, they've been just like increasing. And it's not only the tier 1 cities, it's like gone to tier 2 cities, you have Amazon's, Flipkart, they're like reaching everywhere. Like, does that data, is it that not being there?
So there is a problem with this data because it is survey based. But the good thing about this data is that both the state's data, the unemployment survey of 2013-14, and the periodic labor force survey of 2019-20 are in agreement with CMI's data. So CMI has about 2 lakh homes, a board, where it keeps going back to ask what's going on. Both data sets tend to align. So this is not something I'm saying, this is something the government is saying, that labor force participation rates have fallen. And the survey is broad enough to be able to capture people who've moved away from doing something else to driving a cab. One other sort of interesting thing that I learned was that the middle class in India has stopped growing. That the number of cars sold in India has been more or less stagnant for the last decade. So in 2013, we sold 27 lakh cars here. In 2019, before the pandemic, we sold 27 lakh cars. And last year, we sold 27 lakh cars. The number of residential properties in the top 8 cities has remained stagnant for the last 10 years at 3 lakh units. Strangely enough, the lower middle class has stopped growing. So in the last 5 years, the sales of two-wheelers have remained flat. There are not enough people coming out of poverty and saying, okay, I'll buy a motorcycle. So not only is it corroborated through different sets of data, but I think what it's showing is quite dangerous, that we have gone into a space where economic performance not only is dissociated from popular politics, but even a decline of this magnitude has not become something that is expressed whether in parliament or whether in the media.
Hi, Aakar, lovely to meet you. My question for you is, what sort of degradation is going to take, like, is it going to really take for the Indian middle class to get politically mobilized against the state, or even the big money to stop going towards the current ruling party?
So the money that goes to the BJP doesn't come from the middle class anymore. So the highest denomination bond that you can buy and give to the party anonymously is the 1 crore rupee bond, but that's also the most popular bond. So very few people actually buy the 1,000 rupee bonds. It's mostly somebody, we don't know who, buying dozens and maybe even hundreds of 1 crore rupee bonds and giving them to a party. And the party is not actually obliged to say who it is that gave it to them. So the money doesn't come from them. Do we have another example to show that the middle class loses its illusion from a party that damages you economically but socially does it successfully? I would say perhaps Pakistan, but maybe not even that. So Pakistan went through a similar period where they were going after minorities through law in the 80s, but this didn't happen democratically. There was a dictator there. There was no popular endorsement of what he did. And Pakistan's begun to secularize its laws in many ways. So they had what is called the Had Hudud punishments, where in the early period of Islam, there were no jails. So punishment for theft was normally corporal. So they would cut off your hand or your foot or whatever. So Pakistan passed these laws and they trained a set of doctors to sort of execute these amputations. But since all the judges were trained in common law like ours, they didn't want to go there. So nobody's hand was, cut off, nobody's foot was cut off. Pakistan's Shariat code banned interest from the banking system in 2000. But in 21 years, that law, the order has been ignored. The punishment for rape, which was conflated with a fornication if the woman could not produce witnesses to the act, was returned from Sharia to the penal code by Musharraf, I think in 2008 or so. So they are actually going the other way. They are taking laws they're coming back. Pakistan and India have the same penal code, which was given to us by Macaulay. So if you go to Lahore and you say 144, 302, they know what that means. 420, they know all of that. But what happened in the 80s was they started taking these things out and putting them into Sharia. But now they've started putting them back. Whereas we are going the other way. We are saying that on the issue of marriage, on the issue of citizenship, on the issue of beef, we'll go after specific communities and the courts will sit back and say it's okay. So I don't know whether the middle class, there is an example that we have of the middle class taking a beating and saying, okay, maybe we've done something wrong. I should say this, that in India, identity is very strongly felt. A patidar or, I don't know, well, maybe caste is the biggest one, I don't know, because faith has come to us fairly recently, I would say. It dominates the other stuff. There is no economic vote in this country. So my slightly pessimistic answer would be to say no.
Okay, my question: you don't pull any punches on social media, etc., etc. Have you experienced bullying from the state or from large parts? I don't mean just this usual trolls that come on social media, but systematic bullying of any sort, and how do you deal with it?
So there is what the state can do obviously is they can take you to court and they can send you to jail. So if you're fine with that, then there's not much else they can do. So you have to face the cases, I suppose. So the only trips I've made during the pandemic have been to various courts and to say hi to my friends in the CBI and the ED and so on. But like all things, the human being gets used to this sort of thing fairly easily. So you don't like, it's not sitting very heavy on your heart saying, oh, my life is ruined or whatever. Also, the fact is that the malice is held only at a particular level in the state. The person who's actually supposed to persecute you doesn't care, like he's got to go back to his wife and like have his dinner or whatever. So he wants to get you out of his office as soon as possible. So that also helps. You tend to meet sort of different people. Yeah. But I should say that the thing that the BJP has, which the other parties also have, but the BJP uses best, is that they can produce violence through their words. And I think that is something we need to be mindful and careful of. And I think it would be dumb to just ignore that. Once the BJP is able to mobilize or focus on something or some person, violence can come fairly soon. I'm not a sociologist, so I can't say with any degree of certainty why Kerala managed to sort of not get one. An obvious reason is that if you have very large minorities, it's highly unlikely that they'll want to cut their own head off. So you've got a large number of people that you can build on, which you didn't have in Gujarat, which has a 9.5% a Muslim population. The armed forces come out of a very unique framework. Those of you who are familiar with the sapper regiment at the Alsur Lake will have seen that it says 1780, that's when the regiment was raised. Who were they fighting till 1947? Who were they killing? Who were they bayoneting? Us, right? So they come from a space where they are disciplined enough to do exactly what they are told, and they don't care what is there in front of them. They have this this buddy system, and so on. So they are unique in many ways. Also in Pakistan, I think it's not very different. That Pakistan tried to Islamize its army under Zia, but it didn't succeed to any large extent. Also, thankfully, it remains a secular space in more ways than one. So you have to have a sort of regimental Maulvi, you have to have a regimental Padre, and you can't deny the right to worship to anybody, even if there's just one person in their regiment. So they come from a space where it's drilled into them that this is the way things are. That could change, but yeah.
Hi. I have two questions. Firstly, about this entire unemployed youth thing. I was reading this book by David Runciman called How Democracy Ends. And in that, he proposes that, among other things, an important factor in populist regimes becoming very violent and all of that is a lot of young people that are unemployed, right? So do you think with the passage of time, and we know India's total fertility rate is also decreasing, so India's population is slowly aging, so will that be an important factor in reining this down? Because as you said, an important factor in people just going and banging down masjids is the fact that, I can't get a job, I'm so frustrated, I'd much rather do that.
I didn't mean to communicate that. I don't think it is unemployment that is the cause of the violence. What I said was I don't have enough agency over my own life. I may or may not have a job, but I'm saying that I don't have enough control over it. Most Indians, most people in South Asia cannot control their destiny. If you're born poor, it's highly likely you will die poor. It's highly likely that your children will also die, poor. If you're born into the middle class and speak like you and I do, it's highly likely that we will do well. It's highly likely that our kids will do well for no other reason than the fact that we were born this way. If you don't have agency, you will go to violence. Yeah, so just to qualify what I said. I don't think if the job situation changes, the violence will end. Identity politics is pretty powerful. It's not, that's the reason why we have a problem with our WhatsApp groups, right? It's not as if it's just like you show somebody some data and they say, oh, okay, Shah Rukh Khan's movie is better than, Salman Khan's order. It's not like that. They are deeply invested in it personally, and it won't be easy for them to exorcise that bit out of them. Sorry, you had a second question.
Secondly, whatever we are seeing now with this government, how much of it is purely their own doing and how much of it is a structural problem with our security apparatus in itself, right? So look at our penal code, for example.
Yeah.
Very repressive. The police has been extremely repressive even before this government.
True.
So is this government's evil mastermind thing was the fact that they divided all this, of tyranny that already exists in the system against one common enemy?
No, so there are problems that are secular, and these are both on the side of the economy and on the side of the state. This is not, but I'm saying that the gratuitous damage, the deliberate damage that we have done through this government, both on the side of the economy and on the side of the social fabric, that could have actually been mitigated in some way had it not been this set of people and such a charismatic, popular, adored figure with a full majority. I think it's a perfect storm that you've got somebody who's highly decisive, not very learned, doesn't really care about what it is that the idea of the image. There was a photo of Barack Obama during his first campaign when he was not yet the president. He's sitting on a chair with his feet up on a desk and he's on the phone, and there's a woman who's photographing him. He notices that he's shooting his soles. There's a hole in the sole. And he tells her that this is the second time I've had my shoes resoled. In front of that person, you go with a suit with your name on it in golden pinstripes. Like you should see this is a modest middle class person. So you have this self-image, constant references to myself in the third person. Modi ne ye, Modi ne wo. Why? Like nobody speaks like that. It's weird, Like how would it be if you went to your mother and said, Modi ne whatever, if your name was Modi. So very charismatic, very powerful, adored, wherever he goes, Modi, Modi, Modi. And with that self-image, the kind of damage that kind of person can do in this kind of polity is immense, and we are seeing it.
All right, on that note, thank you, Aakar.
Thank you to all of you for coming, and once again, thank you to the LitFest.